is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Ian Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It is Wednesday's Cross Question. I'm Ian Dale. Joining me on the panel for the next hour, answering your questions, are Dawn Neeson, columnist and former editor of the Daily Star. Ryan Shorthouse is director of the Bright Blue think tank. We can guess which side of the political spectrum that falls on. We'll ask him about that in just a moment. Matt Ford, comedian and host of the Political Party podcast. He's currently on tour with a show called Clowns to the Left of Me, Jokers to the Right. I mean, it wouldn't be about politics, I'm sure. And Esther Kraku joins us, political commentator and columnist. Now, there's lots to talk about. Obviously, a lot of you are going to ask about Partygate, but there are other subjects as well. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. You can text your question to 84850, and you can watch us on Global Player.
0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Ian Dale. This is LBC.
Well, welcome to you all. Let's start with Simon in Southampton. Simon, what's your question, please? Hi.
Good evening. Right, so we are living in an age of blatant lies and gaslighting by governments. Now, whilst I appreciate we don't have the bloodshed and the murder, etc., is Johnson and his team any better than Putin and the Kremlin?
Ooh, ouch.
Matt Ford.
Well, in some regards, obviously, he's better than Vladimir Putin.
Just about a bit of light genocide here and there.
Yeah. But I take the point. I mean, obviously, he's put on a provocative end to that question, where I'd be more inclined to agree with the assumption behind it, as he not added up the PS at the end. But absolutely, I think people are livid. I actually think a lot of people outside of politics don't realise how livid the public are. Yeah. Public are absolutely insulted.
I think if they listened to LBC, they would realise.
Maybe they would. Absolutely, yes. And I'm sure, of course, that includes everyone who can hear this right now.
Exactly.
But I watch some of the political coverage and I consume a lot of it. And then you go around the country, as I am doing at the moment with my new talk, Clowns to the Left of Me, Jokers to the Right, as you rightfully plugged in. Thank you very much. You go to mattford.com to get those tickets. I talk to people left and right all around England and Scotland, and where people are absolutely... No one is buying this rubbish. They all know he's lied, and they think it's absolutely incredible.
Do they care? Because they didn't care in 2019 when they voted him in, and they knew that he had a reputation for being ambivalent with the truth.
But there's a difference between, this guy's a bit of a character and he fibs a bit and it's all a bit of a nod and a wink, and this was pre-COVID, before people couldn't get to the funerals of loved ones. And I genuinely don't think that Boris Johnson and the people around him are existing in the real world, because people are so offended. And it's not just the offence of the initial offence that people are really annoyed that he was not abiding by the laws that he brought in at all. Being lied to about it afterwards is just an insult to our intelligence. You should just admit it. And the police know that he lied. Everyone knows that he lied. And we're being put through this silly charade. I mean, I can't remember, and I know I'm only 39, but I've never seen...
You've been 39 for quite a few years.
You son! I've looked 39 for a number of years, but
I think it's a very good age. I'm never leaving 39.
Thank you very much. I've never seen a government lower itself like this. It's just humiliating watching ministers go and defend...
Let me play devil's advocate a minute, because people have always thought that politicians were liars. I mean, I remember there's a guy standing outside Parliament disrupting my radio show once, shouting, all politicians are liars. And we had to move back to Leicester Square because it was so... this is not new that people think politicians lie.
It's the type of lie. People are used to politicians not being straight on shows like this and on David Frost and Andrew Marr and things like that, and trying to hide an argument with a civil servant or a disagreement over policy or a row with the Prime Minister. That is the stuff of politics. People are used to those sorts of shifty answers. This is about a man who broke the law at a time when mingling with people spread a lethal virus before there was a vaccine, whilst at the same time people couldn't go to funerals of people they loved. This is off the scale in terms of how offended the public are. And it's one thing for the initial offence and how annoyed people are at one rule for them, one rule for the rest of us, to just be plain lied to like this. He's not even... You know the thing, lying's meant to be a superpower. He's not even good at it. You can tell when he's lying. It's really, it's the oversell and all this, no, I truly believed. I implicitly believed. No, I really did. And, the police have found otherwise. You just think, you don't even look like you think you believe yourself. Okay. So why should we?
Esther.
Look, I have always said that part of the reason why I genuinely think Boris, while he should go, can't, I lay it at the feet of our opposition, because you're right.
You blame the opposition for him.
No, I don't.
Okay.
I blame the current situation on them, in the sense that if we had a decent opposition, if we had, let's say, an opposition leader who could define what half this country is, for instance, if we had, I'm just saying, the reason why Boris and the Tories in general, who should be completely ashamed of themselves, feel so arrogant and feel like this sort of apology is just going to wash with the rest of the public. And again, you're right. They can't gauge the room, is because they know that Keir Starmer is hopeless. And most Labour politicians are hopeless. That's my frustration. I want an actual opposition in this country that's competent. I want an opposition that's actually an opposition. And the fact that we can't even have this conversation because the idea of a country led by Keir Starmer fills me with abject horror. That's the real issue here. If he knew that he was up against someone formidable, he wouldn't be doing this.
Well, he's more formidable than his predecessor, isn't he?
I mean, but Corbyn was hopeless. I mean, the whole 2019 vote that you were going...
Starmer's hopeless too.
He's not as hopeless. He's a bit more palatable. He's a bit more palatable. But the whole 2019 vote, as you were saying, was basically on Brexit. There was not really a referendum on Boris himself, because we've all known he's a bit of a clown and a character and all of that. But most people, I mean, that's the only reason why he broke the red wall.
But going back to the question, are we living in an age where blatant lying doesn't matter? Just as an add-on to that, you could say, if you go back centuries and look at the arguments that were taking place in the 18th, 19th centuries on certain things, people were lying there about their motivations, about the facts. It's not actually anything new, is it?
I think we've always lived in that age. I think now it's very obvious, or it's more obvious, that the quality and the standard of our politicians is simply not good enough. That's basically it. We're noticing it a lot more. And I could argue, for all the criticisms you could level at Cameron or Tony Blair or even Gordon Brown, I genuinely believe there were higher standards in our politics when they were in power than Boris. Absolutely.
Ryan Shorthouse, just on that, don't you think that people of different generations always say that about previous generations? Oh, it wasn't like that in my day.
Yes.
We have much better politicians.
There's a sort of...
in 1983, you'd have Conservatives say, well, I remember the Macmillan government. There were titans in that government.
Yeah, I mean... Also, I think in terms of the salaries that you can get outside of politics, maybe talent is drawn away. So there may be something to it. But, is there any evidence that the quality of politicians today is worse than in the past? There isn't any. I haven't seen any. So, maybe some of it is nostalgia. On this point about Boris, I mean, I'm not here to be the sort of defender of Boris. But what I would say is, I don't think he thinks he's lying. And there's a difference, isn't there, between... deliberately misleading Parliament and inadvertently doing it. And the former is definitely a breaking of the ministerial code. The latter isn't. And I think the bigger problem is that, and I remember I used to be an advisor.
Just on that, hang on that. Amber Rudd resigned as Home Secretary because she inadvertently told a lie to Parliament. She didn't do it deliberately. She was told by her civil servants this happened, so she read it out in the Commons, and she resigned over it. Turns out she shouldn't have done in the end.
Well, I think Amber Rudd probably has a higher threshold for doing things than Boris, obviously. But what I would say, the bigger problem that Boris has is that he's not a details person. I just don't think he really knew the details of the rules that he himself was signing off, which is a very big problem. It is a big problem. And I remember when I was an advisor to the Tory party in the shadow education team, and he was the shadow higher education minister, David Willits, who was leading the team at the time, would always ask Boris, what's in the government paper? And he didn't have a clue. So the bigger problem is that we've got somebody who's not really interested in the dry detail, which had profound impacts on people in the way that they live their lives. In terms of Boris resigning, I think if he consistently did it, he consistently broke the rule, and if he gets more penalty notices from the police,
which he probably will,
then I think he should resign if it's a consistent thing. Because I think a lot of people say we all make mistakes. This one case here, he's got a penalty charge notice for it, fixed penalty notice, for it. But if it's repeated, then I think it is a resigning matter.
Okay.
That would be the
Dawn Neeson.
Well, speaking as a tabloid journalist, I should know all about lying, shouldn't I? However, I
You
think...
said it.
Thank you very much. Before you did, Ian. I think, we've all...
Self-knowledge is a wonderful thing, isn't it?
I mean, Boris has always served up more Whoppers than Burger King, hasn't he? He really has. I mean, that is what he does. I mean, he's lied to his own wife and children. So the fact that he can lie to the country shouldn't come as a shock to anybody. And it doesn't matter what we actually say now. He has been found guilty of this, so that is the end of that. In the eyes of the law, he hasn't got a criminal record, but he is guilty. And all this, I only popped in for 10 minutes. It's not about how long you were there. It's not about the birthday cake. In my world, it's not even about the lying. It's about the hypocrisy, Ian. It's about the sacrifices everybody made. I know it's almost becoming a cliche now, but I was talking to a woman this morning whose 14-year-old son was in hospital with cancer, severely ill with cancer. And it was his birthday the week before he died. And, Boris saying, I only popped in for 10 minutes and there was a birthday cake there, but this lad's friends weren't allowed in to say goodbye to him.
Well, whenever we do a phone-in on this, I mean, you get countless heartbreaking
exactly,
stories
Ian,
like
his
that.
own dad was only allowed in once to say goodbye to him.
Yeah.
So, and I think this is what the country are feeling now, the anger and the frustration. It's not about a cake, it's not about a birthday party. It is about the sacrifices that so many ordinary people made. And whether Boris is lying or not, I expect him to lie. I expect most politicians to lie, to be honest with you. But I just think it's the anger and the frustration that I think people will never forget.
But where
in
do
this
you think
country.
this is going to end up? Because he's clearly not going to resign either this one. What about if there were more fines? What if... I mean, if he's got to go in front of Parliament, presumably next Tuesday, and make a statement. I mean, Starmer, however useless you think he is, Esther, I mean, it is... I mean, look, he's a barrister. He should know what he's doing in circumstances like that.
I think a barrister would know what a woman is. Sorry.
Well, yeah.
I'm so outraged. I wonder what he calls his wife, what he thinks his wife is.
Well...
Let's not even go that far. But...
Well, we can't gender her and say she's a female. But, I mean, there's a fine line between being forensic and being boring. And you always want... I mean, I agree with Esther on this one. I mean, Keir Starmer would never get my vote. He doesn't even know what I am. I know it's a dangerous route to go down, but he can't tell me what I am. That's half the country. He doesn't even know what Esther and I are. So how am I going to vote for someone like that? So I'm torn between somebody who is quite clearly a compulsive liar, and I think he does know what he's doing. I mean, how can you be stupid enough not to wander into a room or a garden filled with people drinking and having nibbles and think, this isn't a party, this is a work meeting. I think we should have more work meetings like that in general. But we're torn between someone who is a compulsive liar and someone who doesn't even know what I, as a woman, am. I mean, what am I meant to vote for?
Well, two of you have brought that subject into this. It may come up in a question later.
Yeah. The women.
I said two of you.
You're allowed to say that.
I'm quite happy to call you women, but we don't need to get sidetracked on that particular debate at the moment, I don't think. We will move on to another question in just a moment. It's 8:15.
This is LBC.
An artist that is not defined by genre, nor sound, nor tempo.
Nothing great comes easy, but that's where you have a story to tell.
Classic.
Cross Question with Ian Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
It's 17 minutes past 8. We have a very troublesome panel with us tonight. They consist of Dawn Neeson, former editor of the Daily Star, Ryan Shorthouse, who's actually the least troublesome member of the panel so far, director of the Bright Blue think tank. What is the Bright Blue think tank, Ryan?
Good, I'm allowed to plug my think tank. Matt's allowed to plug his show. It's a centre-right think tank, which is all about vetting and changing government policy.
Is it sort of a bit Thatchery, a bit Borisy, a bit sort of wettish?
We're sort of on the liberal wing of the Tory party, so we're a bit Cameron-eyed.
Okay. And Matt Ford, comedian, host of the Political Party podcast, starring the two all over the country at the moment. And Esther Craig, who is a political commentator and columnist, has got the most amazing dress on, if I may say so.
Thank you.
Right, let's go to the next question.
I wondered what you were going to say then, I'm sorry.
Did you? Seth is in St John's Wood. Hello, Seth.
Hello, Ian.
Hi, what would you like to ask?
My question is that they say a nation gets the leaders it deserves. If that is so, then have the standards of the British nation fallen so low that we deserve a leader as lacking in character and moral integrity as Boris Johnson?
So in the words of the Pet Shop Boys, what have we done to deserve this?
I know. Well, I think that... Yeah, the country, this is a very low moment in our politics. I'm more concerned with the actual Tories that are backing Boris. And this is my fear. Are your standards so low, and do you believe your party is so void of real talent that you're willing to back someone who clearly lied and had no regard for a country he put in lockdown or the sacrifices we made as a country? That's what's really worrying me. I mean, seeing all these MPs on Twitter say, oh, he did wrong, but he can't go. Or printing, images of his apology, which I could really use as loo roll because it's completely pointless.
And there's plenty of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just embarrassing. This is my bigger question. Is you have no faith in your party or the talent in your party that you're willing to put your neck out for someone like this. That's really concerning. And I could actually put that argument to the Labour Party as well, because I can't think of more than 2 MPs.
I mean, you are somebody who would presumably self-identify not just as a woman, but on the right.
Self-identify.
On the right, yes?
Well, I think I would say I'm very socially conservative, but I think I'm fairly liberal in terms of my economics. I don't tend to sway. I mean,
so I'm the other way around.
Well, on a normal day, I would tend to vote Tory, but I have switched my votes in my lifetime. So I think I'm someone that can be swayed by a good argument. But I also think there should be standards in our politics, and what we're seeing now is a complete embarrassment. I don't know how this man has the moral fortitude to tell anyone anything, when clearly the way he conducts himself and the way he thinks what he thinks this country deserves is so low.
Dawn, Esther mentioned the word there, standards. Is that something that we need to have a much bigger debate about in our society? Because if we think back to all of the sleaze allegations in the major years, we then had the Committee on Standards in Public Life, and they listed, was it 7 different things that the politicians had to abide by, and I'm not sure that the general public think things have got any better over the last 25 years.
I don't think they have. I think most people are convinced that it has got worse. I mean, everyone cites Margaret Thatcher as somebody that they felt they could respect. I was lucky enough to interview Margaret Thatcher as well as David Cameron and Tony Blair, and out of the 3 of them, well, the one, Ian, that I genuinely respected on a personal and a political level was Margaret Thatcher. I felt she was pretty straight down the line, whereas the other 2, even though I'm not a political animal, and I certainly wouldn't know who to vote for at the moment. I think the vast majority of people in the country wouldn't know who to vote for. But I felt maybe it's because she's a woman, or she identified as a woman at the time, Esther, I believe. Maybe it was...
You're obsessed.
Oh, of course we are, we're women. But I think that, yes, we are getting the leaders we deserve at the moment. And we keep coming back to the fact that I don't think we have an opposition that's strong either. And I think, if there was, thankfully there isn't, a general election, in the next few months, I think most of the country would be going, I think we'd probably have the lowest turnout.
Yeah. But if you look at the front bench of the Labour Party, I think it's
I'd rather not.
it's quite difficult to imagine Keir Starmer getting into this position. It's quite difficult to imagine Rachel Reeves getting into this position. It's quite difficult to imagine Wes Streeting getting into this position. I could go on. And do you think that might have a real impact on the result of the next election?
Well, I mean, not all politicians are bad, okay? And I think we do assume now that, I mean, David Amos, who we obviously the tragic story of David. Not all politicians are bad. Some of them are good, and most of them, I do genuinely believe, go into it for the right reasons. I think they do want to do good. However, the ones that tend to rise to the top for whatever reason, and this goes back to do we deserve them, are the ones that shouldn't really be there.
Okay, Brian?
Well, Theresa May, Gordon Brown, I don't think they're particularly sort of terrible characters.
No, Theresa, I mean...
Maybe a bit dull, that's the...
Well, she ran through a field of corn, didn't she? I mean... That was quite exciting.
Field of wheat, get
sorry,
it right.
I'll tabloid journalist and make it up.
That's called excitement in Maidenhead.
But to be honest with you, I'm a bit wary of this argument that, there's so much mistrust of politicians. Only some of them are good. Most of them are good. And, I've seen evidence from the Hansard Society, another think tank. MPs today work much more hours than they used to, spend more time in their constituency. And obviously social media means they're much more engaged than they are in the past. And I do worry about, all MPs are terrible, they lie. Actually put off very talented, honourable people from going into politics if it's so damned in that way. But in terms of how do we get to Boris, I think if you look at the 2019 election, I think, Boris has always been very lucky, I think. And yes, he's got a force of personality, but there's two things. One, Jeremy Corbyn was leader of the opposition, and that put off a lot of people in red wall areas, working class voters, put off, I think, largely by his attitude to the IRA in the past. And I think that worked in Boris's favour. And also, remember, we'd had years of wrangling over Brexit, and Boris had a simple slogan, get Brexit done. And people, I think, just wanted to break the deadlock. So I don't think it was anything particularly exciting and brilliant about Boris. I think he was at the right place at the right time.
Matt Ford.
I think the last group of people that we should be blaming for the situation we're in are the British public. It is the job of political parties. They are the gatekeepers of our democracy. It is up to them to choose the very best candidate possible, and both of them failed. And we've had a problem in the last few years.
Just as happened in the US.
Well,
that's the understatement of the century.
To go into the 2019 election with a choice of Prime Minister between Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn was actually a disgrace for this country. It was an absolute disgrace. And you've had a Tory party that has over-recruited from one side because of Brexit. It has deeply talented people on their backbenchers, people like Tom Tugendhat, people like Jeremy Hunt, who are prime ministerial material. The Labour Party had tons of talent that in the Corbyn years wasn't just ostracised, it was bullied and harassed. Every major political party in this country, the SNP, the Tory party, the Labour Party, has allowed a hooligan element into our politics because politicians in the modern era have become weak. They're not brave enough to take on their own supporters and say, actually, that behaviour is appalling, you are not welcome in this party. And they've all allowed it to happen. And the last group of people we should blame in the public, you two whittle it down to the best you've got, and we are then forced to choose between them. So I don't think we should over-analyse our role in this. We can only choose. I mean, it's only going to be the leader of the Tory party or the Labour Party that would have conceivably formed the last government. That is not our fault. That is because politics in this country has become beholden to bullies online and bullies in person, and they should all be ashamed of themselves.
Could you imagine being American? My God, having to choose between Trump and a corpse. I mean...
Okay. Took a turn, didn't it?
I'm just saying. No, you make a good point. The choices we had were disgraceful, but if I was American, I'd want to bash my head against them.
And they've got more people to choose from as
330 million.
I did get into those two.
So Biden's better than Corbyn, isn't it? I mean, at least with Biden you had experience...
Is he alive?
Well, yes, he is.
Not by your definition. Seth, thank you very much for that. Let's move on to Matt, who is in Lahti in Finland. Hello, Matt.
Hello there, Ian. How are you?
Very well, thank you. What's your question?
Okay, my question is, should Britain be supporting Finland's membership application of NATO?
Matt Ford.
Yes, I think it should. I mean, I think you have to have alliances that are relevant to the modern world. And if you have other countries that want to join, particularly when you're trying to... I mean, I think there's a wider problem actually about Western foreign policy. The withdrawal from Afghanistan, I think, is the biggest single foreign policy mistake of my lifetime. And if the West is going to learn and build new alliances, then so be it. But I think the fundamental problem actually is the post-Iraq malaise that I thought was just affecting the left, but it's also affected the right, which says this is not about... I mean, quite apart from it not being in the moral interest, it's not even in our self-interest to leave Afghanistan to the Taliban. So I think...
Certainly not in the way it was done. I mean...
Yeah, but I think we can lay that firmly at the feet of Biden, really, can't we?
And Boris Johnson and everyone who withdrew. It's incumbent on...
Yeah, but once the Americans had decided to withdraw, there was no way that any European country would go it alone and say, OK, well, we're staying. Yes, it wouldn't have been possible.
I don't get a sense there was a huge resistance to it, sadly. So, yes, I think expanding NATO and bringing in new countries is a good thing.
Dawn, do you think there are any dangers in Finland joining NATO?
Yes, because we have consistently over the decades promised Russia that we would not allow the countries around the border on the Eastern European side to join NATO, and we...
Well, Lithuania, Latvia...
Yeah, no, but we have gone back on that. We have gone back on that, and I think that's part of the reason we're in this
Gorbachev
situation.
says that promise was never made.
Well, I mean... I don't know whether it actually was or not.
I tend to believe him rather than Putin.
Well, yeah, there is that as well. No, but, you know, politicians are liars. We've already had this conversation. But, I mean, it's like... I think there is a danger to it, Ian. Joking aside, I do think there is a danger. It's such a volatile region at the moment. And while I think, personally, yes, it would be great to have Finland on board, I think Putin, at the moment, could take that as another red flag and...
So what?
That's exactly what I was about to say.
Well...
All right, we'll say it. Let's go on to Esther then.
No, so what?
Well, I would rather try every form of democracy and every form of negotiation rather than have any more kids killed.
Well, it's very obvious that trying to appease Putin is not working.
No, I didn't say appease him. I said there must be some way more than we can do, a democratic end to this. Rather than, I mean, there's so many people are dying, and the stories there.
I don't think democratic and Putin should be ever used in the same sentence. I would argue that there's not really much point in Finland joining NATO. And I've said this repeatedly, that if you're a US ally, you have very little motivation at the moment to align yourself with the US because of, let's say, Afghanistan, because of the fact that the American leadership is so weak, because of the fact that really, and I feel like many Western leaders are telling themselves a lie, that sanctions against Russia at the moment haven't worked. And
haven't they? I think they're working incredibly well.
I mean, the ruble's recovered, right? And I would say that arguably this is a huge failure on, European energy policy, because they didn't foresee this, because they were comfortable enough to continue to get cheap.
But that is true. But NATO, Russia, I think, has been a lot more united than I ever thought it would be. Yes, you've got Germany and France sort of not quite playing ball on some of the sanctions, energy ones, but you've got to understand the reason for that in Germany's case in a way. But I think the fact that this has happened, I don't think anybody foresaw that he would launch a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. That has put the wind up Sweden and Finland, and so they naturally think, well, okay, we want to at least think about becoming members of NATO. That's a natural response, isn't it?
What would actually benefit Finland from making that decision? Because obviously, like Dawn said, there is the very real possibility of Russian aggression as well. But also, can you really trust NATO allies at the moment? I don't think so, personally.
Well, I think if you're a Ukrainian, you look at the situation and think, well, okay, they could have done more. You can always do more. But if they had been members of NATO, Putin would not have done this, quite simply.
I take that argument.
Okay, Ryan.
I agree with Ian. I mean, I think Finland's membership should be fast-tracked. Let's not sort of swallow the Putin propaganda. NATO is a defensive organisation. It's up to countries if they want to join it. Of course Finland's going to say, neighbouring Russia's just invaded Ukraine. We're quite fearful. No way will Russia invade a NATO country. Its firepower against NATO is minimal.
But we didn't think it'd invade the Ukraine.
Well, Ukraine is not a NATO country.
No, I know it's not.
And of course, NATO is providing arms to Russia, which has meant that Russia, which has a much superior military force to Ukraine, is not winning in the way that it thought it would, and in fact has now focused its attention in eastern Ukraine. So even though NATO is not directly militarily intervening, it's still supporting Ukraine, and that is having effect. There is no way that Russia would ever invade a NATO country, and that is why Finland want to join, and it's right to.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Matt, who's in Finland. Matt, I don't know how long you've been in Finland for, but could you have ever imagined that Finland would ever apply to join NATO?
No, not really. I've been here 2.5 years. I've been married 19 years to a Finn. I think the invasion of Ukraine has made a great deal of difference to the population of Finland. And I now think that, maybe 70 or 80% of the population are in favour of NATO. I heard from the panel that there is no fear or apprehension of the US, but I think there is. I think the USA is still a key player in world security, and I don't think that Russia really wants to play that card. I think that the Finns will vote or will decide to go into NATO, and I think that's a good move. I think in the current,
will it be the government that decides, or will it be a referendum?
I don't think it's a referendum deal here. I think it's going to be more of a decision. One of the things I think about referendums is you're putting off a governmental decision to somebody else, and it's not a very good idea.
Okay, Matt, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for calling in. That was Matt's first time call. Really good question. We'll come to more of your calls in a moment. It's 8:34 on LBC. Time for the news headlines with Lottie Morley.
A Conservative peer has resigned as a Justice Minister after Boris Johnson was fined for breaching lockdown restrictions. Lord Wolfson says he's disappointed by the official response to the scale of rule-breaking in Downing Street. The man who stabbed Sir David Amess to death has been told he'll never be released from prison. Ali Harbi Ali has been given a whole life term for his attack at a constituency surgery in Essex in October. A 3-year-old girl and a 5-year-old boy have died in hospital following a house fire in Preston on Friday night. A man has been released under investigation while police try to identify how the fire started. LBC weather, showers easing to leave a dry and clear evening, a low of 4 degrees.
This is LBC.
If you're struggling to get your instrument to perform in the moment, UK Healthcare for Men 60% off in your first order, delivered discreetly. Get started today at Newman.com.
Cross Question with Ian Dale on LBC.
Great, trust me.
8:37 on LBC. Welcome back to Cross Question. With us, we have Dawn Neeson, former editor of the Daily Star, Ryan Shorthouse, director of the Bright Blue think tank, Esther Kraku, political commentator and columnist, and Matt Ford, comedian and host of the Political Party podcast. I was listening to your podcast the other day with James Cleverly, the Foreign Office Minister. What was he on?
About 6 cans of Guinness. He got through a lot. He's a proper
you
rugby
could
boy.
tell.
Yeah, he was having a great time. And I've got Rosie Duffield this Monday at the Duchess Theatre, who obviously, given the conversation we're having now,
Yeah,
is a
brilliant.
highly relevant figure.
Go, Rosie.
And where are you off on tour?
All over the country. So Nottingham, Cardiff. I always forget. The London Bloomsbury Theatre on Saturday the 23rd of April. Exeter. Oh, check the website, Matt.
Are you going?
I'm a terrible self-promoter.
Are you going to Leicester? Because Jeff Norcott reckons that comedy audiences in Leicester are a bit of a challenge.
Do you know what? I did Leicester recently, and I really enjoyed it. So
he doesn't. But
maybe it's more of a labour
he's on Cross Question next week or the week after, I think. Right, let's go to our next question. It's Susan on the Isle of Wight. Hello, Susan.
Hello, Ian and panel.
Hi.
What I'd like to know is your opinion of the student loan interest rate going up from 4.5% to 12% in England.
That does seem to be a massive rise. Now, Ryan Shorthouse, you are a political expert here from a think tank. Explain why the government are doing this, if you can.
Okay, so current graduates shouldn't be worried about the increase in the interest rate. And I'll tell you why. Because 80% of graduates do not pay off their loan in full. Because you pay above a certain salary and you pay for 30 years. So 80% of people reach 30 years, they've still got loads of loan to pay off. So it doesn't matter what the interest rate is. It could be 1,000% for these people. It doesn't matter because the amount that they've accumulated from the interest, they never pay. So that's the way the student loan is designed. Who it hits is very wealthy graduates, the 20% who do pay off their loan in full before 30 years, and they've got to now pay a little bit longer because the interest rate has risen. To overcomplicate it, though, the government has recently made changes to the student loan regime, which means that people will pay for longer, 40 years,
40 years, yeah.
And the threshold has come down. And as such, more people will now be hit by the interest rate. So people on middle incomes will actually be hit by a large interest rate.
So if it was 80% before, what percentage is it going to be in future?
I think it's about 60 to 70% of people will now pay off their loan in full.
Right.
So more people will be impacted by the interest rate rise as a result of what the
This
government's
hasn't got a lot of coverage, has it?
Well, I saw it, but then
I've seen it.
Yeah,
It hasn't been a big story, really, has it?
It hasn't been a big story. And, you know, I think the worst thing the government's done with student loans recently is reduce the salary threshold for when you start paying. It's basically a tax rise for people at the start of their careers in their 20s. Because, you know, it's going down to 25k or whatever. A lot of people, that's the starting salary, and they're now going to have to pay the student loan. So the interest rate is less important than the starting salary, and the government has lowered that, I think, wrongly.
No, I don't think it's controversial to say that Esther is nearer student age than any of the rest of us. What's your view on this?
I mean, it does sting a little bit, but obviously this doesn't. I think it affects people from September of next year. Look, I've constantly criticised this government for not really being on the side of young people, because I often talk to young people who feel very like they don't have much of a future here. And I just think, are you insane? You live in the 5th largest economy in the world. Like, you know, I'm Ghanaian, so you really need a reality check, because many people on the other side of the world can only imagine and can only dream of the benefits that you have here. But when you really talk to them, they just feel like their lives are basically constitute taxation and limited opportunities. And I think this doesn't help that, right? How are you supposed to tell a young person that you can achieve everything that that you want to achieve, provided you put in the hard work, when you're taxing them for longer at higher rates? Inflation is at 7%. It's expected to get to 8.7% by the end of this year. I filled my car up with fuel and I teared up a little bit today. You know, the cost of living is rising.
You teared up?
It's just,
because a bit of petrol got in your eye.
No, it was so expensive.
She's got a very big car.
I don't. I drive a matchbox. I literally drive a matchbox on wheels. But, you know, how do you convince young people? How do you inspire them to be aspirational when you're just taxing them and just making life harder and harder for them? This is the issue. And I've argued that, you know, the current chancellor we have is the most conservative I've ever seen. It's really infuriating.
If there are listeners, though, who are worried about going to university because it might be too expensive, I would say don't worry, because even though you pay your student loan off and you pay that off over many years, you're still better off on average going to university. You'd still earn more despite the student loan repayments. And if you don't earn that much, you don't pay the student loan because there's a threshold. So I don't want anybody to be put off by applying to university.
Okay, Dawn.
I'm actually going to be slightly controversial here. I actually think that too many people go to university as it is. And I do think that a lot of youngsters would benefit by not going to university and getting out there and doing apprenticeship. I have no idea what is wrong with the old school apprenticeship. I mean, that's how I started out.
There's not enough of them for one.
But there's not enough, but I think that's an area that needs tackling. So I think that youngsters are getting themselves in horrific debt that hangs over them for the rest of their life is profoundly depressing. And I think we encourage youngsters who aren't necessarily academically equipped, they'll do much better to do an apprenticeship, to go into other areas of work. I mean, I do think we should encourage more apprenticeships and get more people not going to university.
That wasn't the question, though, was it? Dawn?
No, it's like, well, I mean, taxes are going up.
You don't want to talk about interest rates, really.
I don't want to talk about interest rates, Ian. They're depressing, aren't they? Everything's going up. I mean, I don't even drive and I'm crying for Esther filling a car up.
Matt Ford.
I think there are lots of people who probably shouldn't have gone to university way back in the day, but it was fine when it was middle-class kids doing it. The moment working-class kids get to go to university, we suddenly judge who should and who shouldn't. And if you want to go and get educated, I mean, we all benefit from a more educated society. Also, conversely, I do think you need more vocational qualifications and to encourage people effectively to follow their talent. And I think part of the problem with the way that our society is sometimes structured and the way we think about it is people feel like they have to do it because they're not entirely sure what they want to do with their lives. Now, a default option to go live away from home, to get that social education as well as the academic is very important. But, I mean, you can't tell me before working class kids started to go to university that all these inbred posh people were university standard. There's been lots of people in the past getting very good results from private schools and universities who probably shouldn't have gone. So
some of them even end up running the country.
Well, exactly. I don't think we should judge working class kids too harshly because they want to go and have the same experience.
No, I'm not just in working class because I'm a working class kid. I didn't go to university, but I just think there is so much pressure.
You've done terribly well.
Oh, thank you so much. I could swear at this point, but I'm not going to. But
go on.
Have you got tour coming up by any chance?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, I thought so.
And I saw loads.
But I do think that, I mean, it is fine. Whatever you want to do in life as a youngster, you can achieve, you can go for those dreams, and you don't need a university degree behind you to do so.
And you could, to be honest, though, you can go to university and do vocational courses. About 40% of all university courses are vocational.
Yeah, because I think gone are the days when you automatically go to university just to get a degree.
Yes.
I mean, I went to university and studied German.
Yeah, hide it well.
I did, I know.
Hide it well.
Because I wanted to be a German teacher. Now, okay, my life took on a bit of a different turn after that.
Yeah.
But I think it is entirely right. If you've got a definite idea of what you want to do, what's the point of going to a degree that is completely different?
Yes. But I think what this interest rate hike means is do not go to university to study a useless, pointless degree, because there's also a disparity, right? We're talking about the traditional tax rates, interest rates targeted richer graduates. Well, almost all of them are STEM graduates, right? If you're going to university,
what is a pointless degree though?
Anything with gender in there is pretty pointless.
Back to that subject.
She went there. She went there.
I mean, traditionally, we can all think of, we've read in the Daily Star about David Beckham studies or Kylie Minogue studies, but do those degrees really exist anymore?
So, okay, anything with studies, barring a few, and gender in there is, you can be pretty sure it's useless.
Media studies.
Again, £9,000 to learn gender. I mean, listen, if you were my child, I would handcuff you to my radiator.
I mean,
just explain what gender studies is and why you're so against gender studies.
Because most gender studies graduates don't come out of university not knowing my gender. And that's a bit weird because you spent 3 years doing a degree. I'm assuming you should be able to define a man and a woman. But that doesn't seem to be the case anymore.
She's just obsessed by this subject. Honestly.
Come on, Ian, then.
It's so ridiculous.
What is a woman?
No. I am not going. Well, Wes Streeting is the only politician who I think has given a proper answer to that question.
Is he a biologist?
No, he's Labour's health secretary. Health secretary. But
you like the health secretary might have an idea.
I mean, anybody ought to be able to do that. But again, we're not going to get diverted because we haven't got a question on that. Thank goodness. It's 8:47.
LBC. Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
Lord Frost, Cabinet Office Minister under Boris Johnson, and your reaction to the Partygate and the fact that we have the first time a Prime Minister caught up in a legal affair such as this.
It's a very serious situation, I think.
It would appear he's misled the House, Lord Frost.
Well, this is what concerns me, and that's why I think it's not possible just to say that was then, this is now, let's move on, the world is different. I don't think that's quite good enough. The Prime Minister is on record saying to Parliament that all the rules were observed and there were no passes. That's obviously not the case.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on your radio and on Global Player. LBC.
Are you...
Cross Question with Ian Dale on LBC.
10 to 9 on LBC. Dawn Neeson, Ryan Shorthouse, Matt Ford and Esther Kreku with us for the next 10 minutes. Let's see if we can get in 3 questions in 10 minutes. Andrew in Chigwell is our next caller. Andrew, hi, what would you like to ask?
Yes, good evening. In Extinction Rebellion and other protest groups are blocking petrol and diesel supplies. The police seem to be unable or inactive to actually stop them, and they are disrupting business and they're disrupting the country. Don't you think the police should be doing something about it?
I have views on this, but they should remain secret. Esther?
Yes, and I think the Home Secretary should be leading the charge on this. I think, look, and I've drawn comparisons with how these eco-protesters, which is very, very generous, a very generous thing to call them, how they've been treated compared to anti-lockdown protesters. But I'm not going to go down that route. Obviously, more should be done to contain their actions because they're actually affecting normal working class individuals. But I also think they should be given a one-way ticket to China to see how well they fare when they try and protest there.
That would be an interesting proposal from the government, wouldn't it?
I would pay for it.
Okay, Ryan?
Well, I think their tactics are putting off the public, and we need to keep the public on side in the journey to net zero, which is absolutely essential that we do it. And I just don't think their tactics are helpful whatsoever. Lots of polling suggests the public agree that climate change is something that needs addressing, and we need to have good policy, good technology to support people with that transition. This is putting people off and is in danger of threatening the journey to net zero.
Matt, I don't know what it's like in your area, but around where I live, you cannot get petrol and diesel for love nor money at the moment. Even though I have an electric car.
It doesn't really affect me, to be honest. But I agree. I think I'm inclined... Obviously, I'm deeply concerned about climate change and the future of the planet. So I'm on side with the broad aims, but the tactics drive me mad. I mean, I actually don't think anyone with an inflection should ever be allowed to go lobby for something, because it's like literally the most annoying thing. And I think if you're trying to convince me, don't literally talk like that, because I think even if... if Tony Blair spoke like that, I'd have never voted for him. It really is as fundamental as that.
Dawn.
No, I agree with the rest of the panel on this one. I think they are losing sympathy for a cause that is an important cause. I'm a climate realist, so I'm not a climate denier by any way, shape or form. However, some of the demands they make are unrealistic, and the hypocrisy that goes along with it. I mean, the people gluing themselves to the buildings in London today, if they'd all cycled there from homes that were driven entirely by wind, wave and solar power, from organic food that they grow and eat themselves, then I would say, yeah, OK, fair dues, but they're not. The hypocrisy.
We had one of them in the studio the other day, glued himself to the desk.
I didn't believe him.
And you think, well, what is the point of that? Because that he and they will never be invited on ever again to share their views.
So therefore, they're missing the point of being able to get the point across and have a debate about it. We need to talk about it, but all the time they're alienating ordinary people, as I said, trying to get to work. People trying to get to hospital.
Can I ask, how did you peel that individual?
I wasn't here. Okay. It wasn't my show. Right, Andrew, let's go back to you. What's your answer to your own question?
Yeah, I noticed that not one of the panel actually answered the question. What the question was, do you think that the police should actually be more involved and moving on and doing something about it?
Okay, I did answer it. I said the Home Secretary should give them more power. Andrew, I'll answer that question, right? Okay, I'm a football fan. Unfortunately, I suffer from supporting the same team. Now, as a West Ham...
Rather enjoying it at the moment.
Yeah, it's not too bad, actually. But if as a football fan, if I was going to a game and decided to glue myself and protest myself on the way there, at the game or on the way back, I would be hauled off and thrown in, Nick, before you could say... West Ham are doing rather well at the moment. So they they tiptoe around these people. They make them cups of tea, for God's sake. So I think the police should be doing more, and I think the fact that they are interrupting ordinary people's lives is losing support for them, and it's losing support for the police as well.
Andrew, thank you very much. Let's move on to Mohammed in South Shields. Hello, Mohammed.
Hi, Ian. Hi. My question is, with today's ruling on a total life sentence, should we bring back hanging for someone like that? It's either a yes or a no. I don't want long lectures from the panel. It's either a yes or a no. Should we bring back
we can do a little bit more than yes or no. We do have a few minutes left. Ryan Shorthouse, this is in reference to the man who was, I don't even want to say his name, who murdered Sir David Amos. Let's add a supplementary question on to what Mohammed has said. Should the sentencing be different for people who kill public figures or maybe police officers?
No, I don't think that should happen. And I don't think we should have the death penalty. I think it's ineffective as a deterrent. Other countries have it, and I don't see that they have lower crime rates or serious crime rates. I think it's incredibly expensive, much more expensive than imprisoning people. And also, I think for people who do heinous crimes, actually killing them instead of putting them in jail for their life is actually a bit of a cop-out for them.
Esther?
I completely agree. I think I'm more on the line of I'm very uncomfortable with giving the state that much power. And I think, there's been a significant track record of states that do have the death penalty, that the application of justice is not always done correctly. And there are people that shouldn't be on the death penalty but are. And I just don't feel comfortable with giving our state that much power.
I thought you were going to say just the death penalty for women there, but you resisted that one.
I mean...
Actually, I'm thinking just the death penalty for men, possibly.
I know.
Actually, now we've got a debate, especially some men.
The ones that wear Crocs. That should be a criminal offence.
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep serious.
Right. Okay. That was serious. No, I agree with Esther on this. I think the death penalty makes me very nervous. I do believe that many people can be rehabilitated, and I think we do have to people give that chance. However, there are some crimes that are so horrific, and this being one of them, like the murder of Sarah Everard. I think those people should never see the light of day again. But would I be comfortable with a death sentence? I don't think so, no.
Matt Ford.
I obviously don't agree with the death penalty, but I would bring in whole life sentences for people who phone up LBC and demand yes or no answers. Panellists who are here to give long ones.
Sorry, Mohammed.
But Mohammed, why do you think that? I mean, I'm assuming that you do think this is a good idea.
Well, I think I wouldn't think twice of hanging him for what he's done, to be honest with you. I mean, what about his poor family that's left behind? Shoving him in jail for the rest of his life isn't justice in my eyes. You take a life, you should lose your life. Simple as that,
Well,
We've got
completely
too many good
get.
two-shoes. We've got too many good people.
In a way, what you're displaying is a heart versus head issue, and that I think all of us around this desk, our hearts would tell us, yeah, string him up. But when you look at the consequences of that, I mean, do we really want to live in a country that that does that? I'm not sure that we do, but I think Matt has got a really good point in that there are only, I think, about 45 people in this country who are serving whole life sentences. And I would like to see the scope for whole life sentences widen dramatically. And I think that would be some kind of deterrent. Mohammed, thank you very much indeed for that. Now, a final question from Charlotte on Twitter. As you have Matt Ford on tonight, at the end of the hour, can everyone do their best impression of someone in politics? She says government, but I'm going to widen it to politics. Now, Matt Ford, part of your comedy act is impressions. That's not the whole thing, is it? But I remember the first time I ever saw you, you did the most accurate William Hague and Boris Johnson, and you even did a passable David Cameron. He's very difficult to do, isn't he?
Well, no, I don't agree, Ian. I think it's important to have a go, to get out there and have a punt, and that's what I was doing.
Can you sound like Stewie from Family
I spent 2 hours. I spent 2 hours interviewing Neil Kinnock this afternoon for my All Talk podcast. Can you? Oh, he's wincing. He can't do Kinnock.
What was that you said, William Hague? Well, I can do the current leader of the day, Keir Starmer. Ian, I completely disagree. I think the government have to be absolutely clear. Not only I want to hear from the government, I want to hear from the Prime Minister.
There's a touch. I was going to say there's a touch of administration.
And a touch of racial.
Oh, can you say United Kingdom like Boris?
Well, it's a very important point that we live not only in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and I respect every listener across this. They can all go to mattford.com to get tickets for that.
Ryan Shorthouse, do you do any impressions?
No, not at all. Can I give it to Matt? Because that's much more interesting.
That's not your get out.
No, I think I thought I could do a Boris impression, but that's fabulous.
Well, go on, try.
If I wanted to do a Dawn, what's her name?
Don't say Dawn Neeson, please.
No, Diane Abbott. No, a Diane Abbott impression. I was just going to.
I can do a Dawn Neeson.
Don't you dare.
West Ham are massive. Right, Esther.
I don't think I can. I mean, if I was supposed to do a Diane Abbott one, I'd just be like 2 + 2 is 5. Because her maths skills are very
You've wimped out, haven't you?
I know, but his is so good.
Your future appearances on this programme might depend on whether you can do Diane Abbott.
I mean, I noticed that Boris always says, in the United Kingdom. He doesn't say United Kingdom, he says United, and it's like he stands up a little bit when he says it, like a cat.
But you sound much sexier when you say that. Boris never sounds sexy when he says it.
I mean, he doesn't look very sexy.
Dawn, can you do anybody?
No, I can't. I'm just trying to think of a politician that sounds as common as Mark, and I'm a bit stumped as well. No, I can't.
West Streeting?
Yeah, well, there is that. I'll have a go. Yeah, I know. I didn't say that, by the way. He did. I'm going to have a go at Sir Keir Starmer, and I'm going to go, well, a woman. It's more Margaret Thatcher, isn't it? You asked it.
Right. We have a question here saying, can the panel please define what is a woman? Sadly, we've run out of time. Matt Ford, Dawn Neeson, Esther Craicu and Ryan Shorthouse, it's been a blast. Thank you very much indeed. We're going to talk about whether women are more emotional than men in just a moment. A football manager has got into a bit of trouble over saying that today. We'll give you the background in just a second and then take your calls. It's 9:01.
On your radio, on Global Player, and